Good afternoon, everybody. Just wanting to make sure we should start here. Okay, good afternoon. I'm Nina del Rio, Vice Chairman at Sotheby's and Head of Museum and Corporate Art Services and Sotheby's Advisory. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Lisa Dennison, Chairman. I'm going to let Lisa introduce herself because she will do a better job than I will. And we're here today to talk about this sort of shared world between museums and auctions. And in fact, I think if we could retitle today's session, we would probably call it the general or most common misconceptions about working with auction houses that every museum curator should know. And so we're really sort of, we decided that we would just kind of attack this head on and really talk in an unvarnished way about what we believe is the really wonderful and productive way that we at Sotheby's, and I think auction houses in general, work with museums. I want to start first by just saying thank you so much for inviting us to participate today. I think we at Sotheby's really sort of treasure and are very proud of our relationships with museums and the partnerships that we've established over the years. And I believe, and I know all of my colleagues share this, that we in fact define ourselves a little bit as an organization because of the work that we've done with museums. So I want to introduce Lisa, and we'll also be taking you through a lot of topics. Again, the sort of great and most common misperceptions about how we all work together.
Thank you, Nina. And let me just first ask, you can all hear me, right? Nina, you hear me? Okay, good. Let me ask Molly Nelson to introduce herself. Molly is our colleague working with Nina in Museum Services, and she's going to be fielding questions. Molly, do you want to say hi to the group?
Thank you, Lisa. Yes, hello, everyone. I work with Nina on Sotheby's Museum Services team, and we just want to encourage everyone to enter questions you may have through the chat feature throughout this session. I'll be reading them off to Nina and Lisa as we go. So if you hear a mysterious voice, that is me, and we look forward to your participation today. Thank you.
Thanks, Molly. Yes, we wanted this to be open for questions throughout as we talk, so feel free to interrupt. And let me introduce myself. So my title at Sotheby's is Chairman Americas, but I've been on the other side of the fence. I have been a member of the AAMC. And for those of you who don't know me, I spent 30 years plus an internship in the museum world, working at the Guggenheim, starting as a summer intern and working my way up to director of the New York Museum. And in 2007, at the height of the art market, I made the decision to join Sotheby's. It was the third time in my career that I had been approached by the auction house, and it felt like the time to go. And the reason for that is quite interesting. And this is just a piece of advice that I'd like to give to everybody, which is, as a curator, throughout my entire career, I always went to auctions. And I did so for a lot of reasons. One is, first of all, I just found them completely interesting and like theater. But as a collections curator, I was responsible for valuing the collection, and I really wanted to understand a little bit how the market worked. And I had colleagues at Sotheby's actually who were helping me navigate all of that. So it was a nice entry point. As I built a collection for the museum that we built in Bilbao, where I spent $100 million over 10 years, it was also important to understand what the market was like. But more than that, in the audience of the auction houses, I found collectors, and it gave me a sense of who was participating, who was buying, what were people looking at. Now, the era of live auctions where you can glean all that information from the studio audience or from the audience is kind of over. But what you can do by going to auctions today, live streaming, is get kind of that other information. And I would encourage those of you who come to a city where an auction is taking place, maybe you're in New York for Frieze or London for Frieze during one of our seasons, is come to our views and really experience the exhibitions firsthand. And the other thing that you will find really, really interesting is the people that you come across in those in the views. So it was, for me, it was as a museum curator, a very, very good way to cultivate a lot of, they weren't clients, they were constituents. So, but this idea of starting with some misconceptions, I think is important. And I'm going to start with one, which is that the best way for auction houses to support museums is through exhibition sponsorship or table purchases at galas. So obviously, working for a corporation, we do want to provide financial support to the museum world. That's certainly part of what we do, but we don't do it in the way, or at least at Sotheby's, and here I will say we're not the same necessarily at all houses. We don't do it in the way that banks and luxury good purveyors do. What's not meaningful to us is having our name splashed on the wall, because that really doesn't get us anywhere. And we do a lot of branding and advertising, and that isn't an effective use of our funding. What we do, but there are many, many other ways we support museums, both with direct contributions, meaning funding, but also in-kind services. And we'll talk about some of those. But in the end, what is valuable to us is getting to know your supporters. So being able to be at events and have some interaction with the clients who are your constituents who are there. That's meaningful to us. So we really care about relationships and getting through museums, and Nina's going to talk about this, and we're probably a little out of order here, but it's very, very important for us to be engaged with the people who support you, who come to your museums. That's really what we like to do more than splash our name on the wall. And I think Nina, and I should say also, we don't have tremendous budgets for that. So exhibition sponsorship is probably something that you'll find the biggest challenge when you come to auction houses for support. And Nina, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thanks, Lisa. So just to follow on this topic, I think what we find ourselves reminding ourselves and our museum partners is that your supporters, your constituents are our clients. And in reverse, our clients are your supporters or your potential supporters. And it's really a universe that I think is shared, can be cultivated together. We are very committed to supporting institutions. Lisa's completely right. Supporting them through exhibition sponsorship feels narrow to us. And in fact, every time we think about a partnership with museum, we think about how can we both write a check, but also create a partnership where you're cultivating possible supporters and we're out there working with and cultivating our clients. And so these are all the same universe of sort of an art interested people. So what are some of the finer points that we want to kind of drive home here? And again, some of the misconceptions that I think not every curator really understands because they haven't maybe worked with us. So first and foremost, we encourage our clients, our buyers, your supporters to be looking at possible acquisitions with their museums in mind. What are the holes in your collection? Where are your, meaning the museum's collection, where is the client's, the bidder, the buyer's philanthropic interests, and try to tie those together. So someone's making a decision about what to buy, what to bid on in one of our sales, and we will be thinking with them and talking with them about, well, what museums are you associated with? Who do you support? And in your lifetime, do you have ambitions to really give these works to institutions? And we're always encouraging that relationship. And the fact is that it's great for the collector to have a relationship with a regional museum. It's great for the institution. And in fact, it is very good for us as well. And we often are also working with museums. And I think curators are, this is a bit of an off-center topic for some people, where we're also working with our clients to establish relationships with museums with the goal of becoming trustees. So we make very sort of bespoke one-on-one introductions to, between our clients and institutions and museums, sort of to put like-minded people and organizations together. We know that trustees are a certain fit, and this is something that Lisa and I and our colleagues focus on a lot. But again, that comes out of partnerships with you, relationships with you, and we really think that there's value to be created in these relationships. And finally, our clients love to hear from you. We want to invite, and we often invite curators to sort of talk in our universe, in our different virtual events, in our live events. And we want to offer the same to you. And we're often asked by different museums to talk to your supporters about parts of the market, about how does it work, what is the evolution of auctions in the past year, how have technology sort of changes and pivots really informed our world. So the more we can be sharing our own insight with your supporters, and the more you can be sharing your insight with our clients, that's really the type of kind of symbiosis that I think we've seen work really well. And we think your supporters like it and our clients love it. And after all, it's the same universe. So I'm going to turn it back over to Lisa.
I think partnership is well said, because again, we see it as a relationship, as a partnership. So something that really is mutually beneficial. And I have to say, as curators, often I know you are called upon by some of the people that you advise, and I mean that in an informal way, because people look to curators for advice, to look at things for them, to help them understand the pricing, the market, the condition, the aesthetic value. We are very happy to help you with that. Curators come in all the time looking at things on behalf of their constituents, and whatever we can do to make that job easier for you, let us know. Another misconception is that all of a sudden someone sadly dies, an estate situation has arisen, and people think the museums, I'm sorry, I keep saying museums, that the auction house people are joyous that it means that this work will come to market. Well, that's actually not true. Of course, that's part of our business, but we're always happy as well when estates have designated certain parts that are to be gifted to museums. Sometimes we get the remnants, the leftovers, what the museums don't want. Sometimes we sell works to create funding that may benefit an institution or a charitable purpose. But I think the recent example of Mrs. John Marion, whose estate we will have the privilege of selling next week, is a good one, because everyone always believed the pride and joy of this collection was a gorgeous Rothko that she owned. And everyone was sort of saying, wait till this piece comes to market. And it didn't come to market. It got donated along with many other things, both in her death and in her lifetime, to museums. And that's great. We believe in that. We love that things stay in the public domain. We love when we sell things that go to museums. So don't think of us as only looking to bring property to us, particularly as a former museum person. And we have several former museum people at Sotheby's. We're really, really happy to help you fill your coffers, and even in an estate planning process, to help our collectors understand the possibilities of giving or selling. And we do a lot of gift tax appraisals for people who are looking to sell their works who are looking to donate their works as opposed to sell them. And often there's something that has a disappointingly low market value. For no reason other, not because the work is a lesser work, but because it's not something that the market is valuing at this point in history. And in those cases, we're very quick to help collectors find a way to donate them to institutions that might really care about them, and we're good at making matches. And then, of course, we'll do the work of the gift tax or the donation appraisal. And, there are often ways to look at it. As this artist is, I remember once, I can't remember the name of the artist, but the artist was born in Seattle, and I thought it might be an interesting thing for the Seattle Art Museum, and indeed it was. So those are just different ways that we can help with that situation. Did I leave anything out, Nina? If not, over to you.
No, I would just add on to that the best collections, the most interesting collections, the most interesting sort of provenance of a collection is one that has been shared with an institution, that one that ends up living in part in the public domain. And so, just to underscore what Lisa said, we really believe in that model. We encourage that model. And no, we are never disappointed when an estate goes to the really great works go to institutions, and we're very happy to be selling the rest, whatever is not appropriate. So it is, again, how the art ecosystem works, and one supports the other. So here's another misconception. I am a museum and I want to raise money, so I'm going to organize a benefit auction. And this is going to be an easy way for us to make several hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, which we fully applaud and believe in. What we would say to our audience is there is a right way to organize a benefit auction, and there's a real structure and an art and a strategy to it. And there are a few things that we would say you could get wrong. I think most of all, we would say it's very, very challenging. It's important work. We've partnered with many institutions to conduct benefit auctions, both within the context of our sales, but also at the museums. And even in the last year, when benefit auctions, which generally happen in the context of galas to raise money, haven't happened in that way, we then created a virtual benefit auction platform. But really, what do we want to tell you is this is hard work. It's hard work to ask for donations, being super clear and strategic about who will make the asks, to what artists you will make the asks, where are your gallery relationships, and which works will sell well and raise money for the institutions, and which works might not be as interesting or as sought after on the market. This is all thinking that we like to do with our museum partners. And often, I think at the beginning of the process, museums who are not in the market say, okay, this can happen in 3 to 6 months. And really what often happens is it takes a whole lot longer. So what I will say is get it right, and this can be game changing. We've seen it happen with so many museums in the past, from the Studio Museum in Harlem, to the Guggenheim, to the Hammer Museum, to LA MoCA, to the Norton most recently, with whom we partnered to create a great virtual auction. I mean, this is a space that we're very dedicated to. And Lisa's going to talk a little bit about, when we get into the details, how do we actually structure these sales? What should the balance of live and silent lots look like? What are the price points that are most sought after? So over to Lisa.
Yeah, so a couple of pitfalls to avoid. Number one, timing is critical. It takes at least a year, sometimes two. And every time we've started out with a big organization with a shorter timeline, they've postponed and postponed. The trickiest part to me, so often there's a reason that you're going to have a benefit auction. It's a capital campaign, or you're building a new building, and you may go to the artists who've been instrumental in your program, or who've just, are so linked with the institution, and ask them for something. Now, the first thing is never say this is a one-time ask, because I've seen this happen over and over again, which will never come back to you, and then they come back to you again. Secondly, what you want is, you do not want the artist to go to their closet, which is labeled charity auction works, and pull out a multiple and an edition of 500 that has been seen over and over again. The question is, how do you get the artist to give you something that's really going to be exciting and raise a lot of money and not be embarrassing for the artist or the institution? The biggest pitfall is that, and people hate to hear it, but when you're doing a benefit auction, the curators have to be involved. Your trustees will likely form a committee, but if the curators aren't going to be helpful in asking, or the directors, you will not get the quality of work you need. And if you feel that the curator needs to be at an arm's length from this, it's about a market, I don't want to be involved, it's going to fail. But when curators work with their auction committee, which is likely constituents or trustees, it can be very successful. The best thing you can do is get a lead gift. Get one artist who's a slam dunk to give you something fabulous, and then you can go on to the other artists and say, so-and-so has given us this, and they will hopefully rise to the occasion. I told a museum director recently who had an auction with too many lower value things, that he should think of it as a capital campaign pyramid. Decide how many works can be sustained, let's say in a live or online auction, and figure out how many works for, let's say, $100,000 you want to have, one at the top of the pyramid. And maybe it's 3 at 75,000 or 2 and 4 at 50,000 and so on, so that you are going to be fulfilling these quotas. And if you find that you've only filled the bottom rank, you can say stop and not take any more gifts, so as not to skew your auction with too many lower valued works. So that's really important to do. And we have been successful, as Nina said, putting these works online on Sotheby's platform. It's been a kind of, happy outcome of the pandemic for institutions, because we've been getting bids. People look at our online sales, and we have been getting bids from really all over the globe. And but that's just one model. So you have to really decide, is this going to be a live auction during a live event? Is it going to be a purely virtual auction? Is it going to be a combination of live and online, or live and maybe just silent auction? So really thinking it through carefully and making sure that all the stakeholders are involved and understand what it's going to entail is critical to do that. Okay, next one, the misconception. Curators are good at valuing works of art and understand the values of their collection. As a former curator who studied up on this, who went to auctions, who did everything I could tell you, it's really hard to value a work of art, and it takes real expertise. And for the most part, a lot of museum curators don't have that skill, because you don't necessarily need that skill, because there are a lot of resources to help you through that. And I am going to I think I'll stay with this for a minute and then I'll go to Nina. We appreciate and understand that museums need to regularly value parts of your collections for a whole host of reasons, whether it's an outgoing loan that you need insurance for, whether it's deaccession, whether it's donation, or maybe you need to understand values because you're looking to buy works of art. So don't be shy about calling us. It doesn't mean you have to sell with us. There's no commitment. You're not wasting your time. I had what I called a mole inside of Sotheby's when I was a museum curator. And a particular trustee used to call me up every day after lunch with a certain major mega art dealer and say, Lisa, will you run down to the gallery and take a look at this Lichtenstein that was just offered to me during lunch? What did I do? I would call my mole at Sotheby's, who would say, oh, not that Lichtenstein. It's been, kicking around the market for 4 years, or it has a repaired tear or whatever. They had all the insight, or it's worth this, not what they're asking. And I looked so smart. So use us to look smart. But there are many types of valuations. And just for those of you who don't know what they are, and if you do want to enlist Sotheby's for appraisals, there are fair market values, and FMV, as we call it, is the price that property would sell for on an open market between the willing buyer and seller, with neither being required to act and both having reasonable knowledge of all relevant facts. That is often the mid-auction estimate. So if you're looking at an auction estimate where something is $1 to $2 million, 1.5 would be the fair market value. And it's likely if you walked into a gallery to buy something on the primary market, you're being sold things at fair market values. Insurance values are higher, and those are replacement values. The amount it would cost to replace an item with one of similar and like quality purchased in the most appropriate marketplace within a limited amount of time. So it's usually a higher figure than fair market value. And sometimes people will come to us and say, well, we insured this at this value. It doesn't mean it's the value of the market today. And then, of course, there's auction estimates, which the value range when you present at auction that we suggest. And those need to be high enough to signal the object's importance while remaining attractive enough to engage the maximum number of bidders. So there we will go from low to high. And remember, in an auction, you want to start low and work high. Whereas often in private sales, you put an aspirational price on it, and as offers come in, it cascades down. Nina, to you.
Thank you. So what do we do every day in an auction? We wake up and we value works of art. It touches kind of every aspect of our business, and we spend a lot of time thinking about what impacts the value of a work of art. It is a multi-layered exercise, and in which obviously involves quality and looking at context and condition and all of these elements that you're very familiar with. It is honestly something that every one of us does every single day. So I want to reiterate, and I've seen this having worked with museums for so many years, there can sometimes be a shyness, and museum curators sometimes think that they're wasting our time, or gosh, I shouldn't call the auction house in until I'm at the end of my process and I've really narrowed down whatever list of objects I'm looking at. And if there was one message that I would say loud and clear is call us early and call us often. There's no commitment to work with us. We fully understand that. We want to get to know you, but guess what? We also want to get to know your collection. Spending time in storage with you and with our specialists can be beneficial in so many ways. And I just want to sort of tick through what this means. First and foremost, as I mentioned, we get to know the parts of your collection that are not on view. The better we understand who you are as an organization, all of the sort of pillars and the underbellies of what makes your collection unique, the better job we will do when you choose us to partner with you. It just is, that is just a reality of we want to know you as a collection, as an organization, and being in storage with you really helps. Number two, our specialists who cover every collecting area there is in the art market can actually sometimes augment your curatorial staff. So if you don't have a curator in a certain area, guess what? We have a specialist to cover that area, and we can bring them in. And if you don't have the time or the energy to do the research on really objects that you'd never show in the galleries, and this is really where you should not be spending your time, we do have someone to do that. We do have a dedicated person to look up provenance, and all of this work can be shared with us. In the process, again, as you're just starting, what we really recommend is as you're just starting to look at, let's say you're considering a loan or you are considering a deaccession, and you're looking at 200 objects and you expect to narrow it down to 5. We would like you to call us because we'll do a better job and you will make a more informed decision, I promise, a more informed recommendation if you call us when it's 200 objects. We can then have the conversation with you while everybody's in storage looking together, and that back and forth, that debate, that sort of, well, here's, we understand you, we appreciate why this work might fit or not within your mission, but you might want to look at these other parts of the collection because there's more market opportunity. There's just so much dialogue that we would be having that we believe helps you, the curator, makes a fully thoughtful and informed recommendation when you get to the point of narrowing down that list. So calling on us early, calling on us often, and deliberate with us. I would say we really believe it's additive sort of to us and also to you. Okay, I hope we're not moving too quickly, but I know we have a very limited amount of time, and I want to remind everyone, please, if you have questions, don't hesitate to send them to the chat. But I'm gonna turn this over to Lisa for some of the most basic things that some of our museum partners sometimes forget when they're bidding and buying at auction.
So yeah, let me just say at the outset, one of the questions that just came in, which is really important, is that you were surprised at the encouragement to call for insurance values because it seems every time we ask, there's no response. Perhaps our small regional museum just isn't important enough. We will not let that happen. And Nina del Rio at Sotheby's.com. You can call me. Call me, lisa.dennison at Sotheby's.com. There is no project too big or too small for us. Another misconception is that auction houses are only valuable, that, we only really, the main activity that like a museum services department at Sotheby's does, or an auction house is to help you deaccession your collection. But I want to encourage you to think about buying at auction in different ways. And here's what I mean. And then what Nina was alluding to is once upon a time when I was a curator at the Guggenheim and we had formed an acquisition committee, there was a fantastic early Cindy Sherman that could not be gotten through the primary market. There was no way to really find it. And it came up at auction at a very reasonable estimate, as these things tend to do. And I was authorized to bid for it up to $15,000. And it was first time bidding. I was in my office with a couple of trustees around me, and my hands were shaking. My hands still shake when I bid at auction on the phone. And I got it at the top end of the estimate of $15,000. And when I hung up, the trustee said to me, "You forgot the buyer's premium." Now, I had not calculated that I would have to spend $15,000 plus, which is the hammer price, where the hammer falls. And then that money goes to the consignor, but Sotheby's makes its money in what we call the buyer's premium, which is a commission. And that is a sliding scale depending on the value of the work that you're buying. That goes anywhere from about 25% down to about 12%. So don't forget to calculate that in, because often a price might look quite attractive until you realize you're going to have to spend about 25% more. But my point is that there are treasures at auction that only come to auction and that sometimes come up at really extraordinary values for artists that, might not be something a collector wants today, or maybe they do, but something you could be looking at with your acquisition committees. So really troll the sales and look at the mid-season sales, not just the big banner May and November marquee sales, the day sales where there can be incredible bargains. But for us, I would also say, we know you need a lot of advanced timing. So if you let us know in particular what you're looking for, even if it's something rare and esoteric, and we know it's coming down the pike, we can reach out to you early enough in advance so that you could gather your board or committee approvals and funding if need be. So we want to help you with that, and a wish list is super important. And the other reason a wish list is important is because private sales are as a huge part of our business. Last year during the pandemic, we sold $1.5 billion worth of art privately. And these often private sales are because someone is looking something specific. We know what's on people's walls and we can pry it off the wall with an offer, or there are people who don't want to sell at auction or don't like the cycle of auction. So there's a lot to be done with private sales, and particularly as you're reshaping your collection. If you feel, for example, you have a lesser work of art and you'd like to trade it up for a more important work by an artist, talk to us, because there are ways that we could work with you on trading and finding something more important, all sorts of things. And I think Nina's last point was just to talk about some of our, what we call our Sotheby's financial service options and how else we can just help you as a partner.
Thank you. And again, I'm mindful of time, but I will say, when we understand what you're looking for, there's so much we can surface. I mean, I think if, our web of having access to different material, whether it's in a private collection, and collectors like nothing more than to sell to institutions, understanding that their works would end up in a public collection is so important to them. So there are lots of ways that we can help to find specific artists, very specific works for you. And we understand that you're working on a different time frame, that you might need to have something on approval. Private sale is really an opportunity for you. In addition, there are all sorts of ways that you can finance purchases at Sotheby's. We don't want to sound like a bank selling you some financial product, but the fact is that we are a large enough organization that we have a Sotheby's financial services department. And in fact, you could buy something and we can help you finance it over time. It can be easier for the museum. We can either help you pay over time or literally finance part of the purchase. So I want to sort of end on a topic that I think is really important for so much of the work that we do with museums. Sotheby's is a very public organization. Museums are very public entities. So we appreciate, we understand, we really have spent a lot of time thinking about the nuance of public positioning. And when we do a project with you, when we partner with you, when we sell for you on your behalf, when we buy with you, we essentially become your PR partner. If you already have a PR partner, chances are we've partnered with that organization in the past and we can be approaching public messaging together. But among the most powerful tools that we can offer you as museums is we're a PR machine. We have a dedicated staff. Lisa, our CEO, my department, all of our specialist colleagues, we work very closely together on our museum projects, and we help you with communications. And really, I mean, having done this for so many years, I believe so strongly that a positive, well-communicated message has a positive impact on the outcome of your project, because you as organizations are highly public. So I want to sort of leave it there, but also open this up. I think we've only left 6 minutes, and I apologize. Open this up to any questions. It's just Lisa and me. Whatever questions you have, we want to answer them. And should this not be the right forum, we are going to be hosting a roundtable in another 5 minutes. So happy to take questions on both ends.
So Nina, there are 7 questions in chat, which I've reviewed and answered one already. And by the way, yeah, and if you're not joining the roundtable, please reach out to us individually with your questions. You know, we're here for you. If we don't answer you this week, it's because we have huge sales coming down the pike next week, but we will, I promise, answer. There's a really interesting question about how we value works of living and emerging artists, particularly for secondary market works by artists who may have, you know, painted these works in their studio yesterday, if I can extrapolate from the collection a little bit. These are, you're right in saying that these valuations are often sometimes quite different than the primary market and have serious implication for those artists' careers, both positive and negative. Absolutely, you couldn't have said it better. So you will see in that there is always kind of the art market darling of the moment, whether it's the zombie formalists who all of a sudden burst out onto the scene. A lot of collectors buy these, they're speculatively bought up by galleries, and then they quickly emerge on the art market. And we don't value them higher than their primary market prices. You will see that we tend to value them lower than their primary market prices, because our job is to incite competition. And what that means is a work that was open to just a very small group of people who were privileged to have Gallery X sell to them now is open to the entire market. So we will value them lower and we will let the market take its course and create competition. And sometimes these works can go for ridiculously high numbers, which is both helpful and hurtful to an artist's work, particularly if this is only going to be a short trend. And then you find out a year later that the work you bought for $1 million that was estimated at $30,000 to $40,000 is now worth $30,000 to $40,000 again. An example of that right now, an artist who is experiencing that is Matthew Wong, where works have been estimated under $100,000 and have in each case sold for over $1 million. You'll usually find these works at the beginning of an auction, lot 1, where you want to drum up excitement with someone who's been recently on the primary market. We're conscious how complicated this is and that it can be difficult for artists' careers. And I would just say that in terms of how we value them, you know, we take this quite seriously, but we do not use primary market prices as our guidance. We go below that. And even when a work will, let's say a Matthew Wong catapults to over $1 million, the next time we bring a Matthew Wong to auction, we do not start at the price achieved. We go back, we really go back lower to, let's say, not the original auction estimate, but maybe a notch or two above, because it doesn't mean that the market for that artist has changed. We try to be cautious there. And I would say that buyers should be cautious as well.
Great question. I unfortunately cannot see the chat. So Lisa, you're on deck to be reading the questions.
And Nina, can you hear me?
Yes.
There is a couple people asking a question about how Sotheby's, I'm going to sort of paraphrase to blend them together, but how Sotheby's provides guidance with provenance research, particularly with, cultural heritage, antiquities, Native American. We deal with this a lot also with our African Oceanic departments.
Such a good question, and so important, especially relative to museum collections. So we not only have a dedicated team both in New York and London whose entire job is to do provenance research, touching on all of these areas, but in specific sort of World War II era issues, we also have specialists in all of these areas, whether it's Native American or African or antiquities, whose job, again, is to specifically be looking at provenance issues for any object that we potentially sell or any object that our partners come to us with having a question. So if you, as a museum curator, are looking at your antiquities collection, we want to talk to you and we want to help you research. And again, that's part of what we do in our job. And we want to help take that off of your plate should you be looking at that one object. So we're a large enough staff that we cover those areas very specifically, and provenance research, ties into so much of what we do, because if we end up selling that object, we actually are guaranteeing it. We are guaranteeing its authenticity. We are guaranteeing the correctness of its provenance for a set number of years. So this is a topic we take very seriously, both to help you, but also from a business perspective.
And the further to that question was whether there was an ethics policy in place. And it's not an ethics policy per se, but we have very strict guidelines about what we can and won't sell. And they go in accordance with, what state and local authorities and what's the organization that regulates feathers and ivory and all of those things say. So yes, we have a strong compliance department and a lot of hoops to jump through before we can offer something at auction.
I would just add to Lisa's point, we're probably, of all of the commercial sellers, I think it's because we were a public corporation for so long, our compliance department is very present, and we're probably a little bit more conservative on these issues, so we're extremely careful.
One last question. Are there DEAI efforts taking place in Sotheby's or auction houses currently, internally and or externally? I can say absolutely, just like it is in all organizations. We are taking that very seriously. We have recently hired, I'd have to say, 2 people from the museum world who are also helping us with these efforts. And this goes not only to hiring practices, but also to artists that we're representing in terms of seeking diversity and inclusion. And it's a big focus of the auction house right now. We had a senior leadership offsite that was virtual these last 2 days, and it took up a full morning. So yes, thank you for that question. Is there a question we can answer in 1 minute?
There's one very quick question, really just about sort of what is museum services at Sotheby's? Is it a role in each specialist department, or is it sort of a standalone entity? Nina, do you want to take that? I'm afraid Nina's camera might be frozen. I can answer that very quickly as a member of the Museum Services Department. So it is a standalone department connected to our broader advisory division. And we're here to liaise across all of the various specialist categories of American art to English furniture, et cetera. And we work very closely with Lisa and our chairman's office as well.
So thank you so much for joining. I see we're at time. Please join the roundtable if you can, or as I said, please reach out to me or Molly or Nina or anyone at Sotheby's, first name dot last name at sotheby's.com, and we promise to respond. If you don't, come to me. I respond to every single email.
Thank you, Lisa. And I apologize for anyone whose questions we didn't get to today, but hopefully we can cover those in the roundtable or by email.